From Southern California, this is The Circle of Insight, a show about everything in psychology. Hear the latest in news and views on psychology. Our motto is simple: wherever there is psychology involved, we are there. And now, here's your host of The Circle of Insight, Carlos Vasquez.
From wherever you are around the world, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be exploring the psychology of food, bon appetit, as they say. And I want to start this show kind of not in a traditional sense. I want to start off with a quote, which I don't usually do. It's from a Sufi poet called Rumi, but I think it really covers this show in its true fashion. He says, "The satiated man and the hungry man do not see the same thing when they look upon a loaf of bread." So think about that. So if you're full or if you're hungry, you're not going to look at food the same way. So how are we going to find out about psychology of foods? We have an expert, Dawn Garcia, founder and editor-in-chief of ATOD, A Taste of Dawn. So let's welcome her to the circle. Welcome to the circle, Dawn.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
This is a fun topic. I'm already hungry, by the way. There's part one of psychology of food. So is food really emotional?
Yes, it's highly emotional.
All right, show's over. So it is.
It's highly emotional. I think, as I was explaining earlier, is if you were to go to a dinner and you sat down to have a meal and you had the best day ever, you were happy, you had a great day at work, everything was going great, you eat that food, it's going to be one of the best meals ever. You go back to the same place after you've had a horrible day and nothing's going right, or you're just tired or agitated, the food's not going to taste the same either, because how you taste that food, I mean, we're highly emotional creatures anyways, and food is a very sensory-based experience. So, our palates change constantly, and they're always evolving anyways, and certain things affect the salty levels of your taste buds, the sugar levels of your taste buds, and it really is very mood-oriented, and it's wild. But if you think about how an experience of, like, say, chocolate can be sensual one day and then sort of bitter another, I mean, it's really your state of mind, but the food itself hasn't actually changed.
It's a perception game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can alter our perception by going in a certain state of mind to eat somewhere.
Yes, and you can be completely surprised if you have low expectations, or totally deflated if you have high expectations. So, I think it just kind of depends on how adventurous you are when you sit down at that table and that plate arrives, and, it's really, really dependent on where you're at in that moment.
So if the girl you wanted to ask out says, yes, McDonald's could taste like a Ruth Chris's burger.
It could if you make that date amazing.
That's fascinating stuff. Now, I know you were talking a little bit about, off the camera, we were talking about ambiance.
Yes.
And that kind of goes along with the emotions, right? It starts
Yes.
hyping this up. So they have a job to do at the restaurants, don't they?
Yes, they do. I mean, a really, really good restaurant has either they hire an interior designer, or the restaurateur themselves is just very versed in the actual experiential part of dining. And I personally feel like when you go to a restaurant, that first impression is how it looks. So if you walk into a restaurant that's sort of sparse and there's empty walls, or it's completely the opposite where it's overly decorated and it's too much going on, you can't really focus on the purpose of why you're there. I mean, if you go to in it too, like culturally, right? If you go to have a cultural or different ethnic kinds of food, you want it to be representative of the origin that the food is representing, only because it creates this mood. And it could be a very sophisticated approach. It could be a very simple approach. There's a restaurant in LA, an Ethiopian restaurant that's the perfect example. And there are very, very high-end Ethiopian restaurants. And then there's this restaurant. And it's probably the shadiest looking one of all the restaurants.
Shadiest.
I mean, none of the decor goes together, but you walk in there. I mean, dignitaries go there. Amazingly high prestigious people go into this restaurant. And it's just this market on one side and then the Ethiopian food on the other. And you can sit in like a saddle seat or just like kind of like a awkward table. But when I tell you that you go there and you know that you're about to have an experience, and you don't even care about the ambiance because the food is so simple. And so you have this kind of contrast of the food being very simple, super good, very rich and heavy, but full of flavor. But it doesn't look like tons of stuff, right? Or if you go to a restaurant that's very simple in some of these new modern restaurants and a lot of these gastronomy-oriented restaurants, the food is so beautiful.
Whoa. Gastronomy-oriented restaurant. What is that?
Oh, gastronomy. That's when people use like nitrous oxide and all these different molecular gastronomy techniques. So they have like foamed, I'm going to go blank on this, but they could, like, instead of a meringue, they actually have a nitrous-based foam. And they use dry ice for different things.
So they're manipulating it.
They really do. It's a science. It's like food science, but it's incredible to see them do. And then they bring out like, even the these like sugar sculptures that they bring out. It's so extraordinary, and they are pieces of art. But if you were to have that meal in a room where the walls were not clean and crisp and easy and you didn't feel a sense of flow, that food would not look as pretty, to be honest, because you would be distracted by this crazy gaudy piece of art on the wall that the owner or somebody thinks is just necessary to be there. And to me, I feel like, if you're going to a dinner that is beautiful, you shouldn't make the restaurant so dark that people can't actually see the food. And
I always wondered about that.
Yeah. And then if you're going for them to have the experience, like some of these, there's restaurants where you can walk in blindfolded, and you can actually go into a restaurant completely led with blindfolds on, and you eat your entire meal in the dark.
Wow.
And I think those kinds of things, I mean, that ambiance you're imagining at this point now, because you're touching and feeling and you're really playing on your senses, which to me is really important.
Before we get to that, because I know we're going to talk about the five senses, you said that was really important. For our viewers, are you going to want to share the names of these restaurants off-site so they can email you to get the information?
I'm happy to, yes.
Okay.
I have, there's so many restaurants coming and going, and I think the ones that end up staying are the ones that are very open to really just paying attention to creating an experience. And dining should be, to me, I always say this, and this is why to me ambiance is just as important as every other part of your dining experience. Never take for granted that the person that walked in that door has expendable income. Always assume that the person who has walked in that door has saved up for this meal, and this is a really important thing for them to experience with someone else or even on their own. I mean, they've looked forward to this, and I feel like service should be, the whole thing. I mean, it should be something where you walk out of there and every single person is treated with dignity and respect, and not like they're dumb if they don't know what something is. And I've been out with like friends, and they're not foodies, and I hate that term, but they're not. They're not food savants, so they didn't even know what foie gras was. And the server made them feel stupid. And I thought, but this is your opportunity to share with them what this is and get somebody excited about a new food. And anyways, so...
Security on the server part, probably. So where do we go? Because I think we should, if we can contact her, send an email or something, go to ATOD?
Yes, so you can either go to ATOD, ATODmagazine.com, and hit the contact button. Or Facebook, A Taste of Dawn, ATOD, and it's just spelled out A Taste of Dawn and then capital ATOD. But yeah, I mean... Put
the circle on there so she might remember what kind of restaurants you recommended.
Yes, and just to emphasize that you saw me on this show, and, and we'll
talk about Ethiopia restaurant if you want to find out what the name is.
I'll give you guys, I'm happy to send you some resources of where to go and how to find things.
So let's continue exploring the psychology of food here. So you touched about the darkness. Why do they make it darker?
I think, okay, so this idea of romance, right? I mean, romance is always the thing. However, if you're going to a romantic restaurant for a business meeting, it's the least conducive environment, right? Unless you don't want them to see what they're signing.
Or you want to go out with the boss.
Right. But I think primarily those restaurants they're creating a sense of escape. And if they do it right, you can actually still see the food, and you can really take in your decor, and the ambiance that they've created is to keep you sort of in a nice, relaxed, easy state. It's not like super heightened, and I think all those things. Some people really love exciting. I mean, I don't know if you remember Farrell's when we were kids, but Farrell's was like sensory overload, right? But as a kid, greatest place ever. The kazoos, the noise, whatever. And I think
actually have his CEO coming in of Farrell's next week.
Oh well, yeah. Well, it's not now. It's not quite as it used to be. But I mean, it was the big bright lights and everything was just. But now people have really sort of awakened to this whole concept of dining out and food, and I think they do these sort of darker, more mysterious. Sometimes it's a little elusive and it's wasted, and sometimes it's lovely.
Let me ask you: does it affect your taste of the food? You think? seeing it or not seeing it?
Well, you should be able to always see the food. I think if it's too dark to not see the food, question what you're eating. That's all I have to say. Yeah, or bring out your flashlights on your phones.
May not be beef.
Yes, could be a mystery meat.
That's right.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
So we touched upon ambiance a little bit. What else are you looking for in a restaurant? I know you said cluttered versus not cluttered.
Yeah, I really think, not to cut you off, I feel like when you're going into a restaurant, and it doesn't matter if it's a diner, I mean, they should really sort of fit this concept that they're selling. So if it's a bistro, if it's a diner, if it's Asian cuisine or Asian fusion or whatever realm or scope it is, the environment should never be so distracting that you can't enjoy the meal that is set before you. And I know everybody has different reasons for going out. Some people really is just to go do something. I feel like I really have a deep respect for spending my hard-earned money and going to a restaurant. So if I'm going to go out, why else would I leave my house? You know what I mean? Like if you're going to leave home and dress the part, whether it's nice or you can go and show up in your shorts, I mean, I feel like that, it should be very, very easy to navigate through, seating, all that stuff. None of it should be so much, sometimes it works. Sports bars, obviously it works better when it's crazy busy, because it just looks like the place to be. And but I think flow for me is really, really important. And I think if you walk in that door, you should be greeted with a really happy person and somebody who is really there for you. And no one should feel like someone's too busy to help you. And I think that happens a little too much, especially in like big cities or higher level restaurants. Like they feel like you're bothering them. If you ask them a question or you need to put your name in, I mean, that's their job. They're called host. They're supposed to be hosting, and they should do so with a good attitude and openness, because honestly, that's what creates repeat customers and longevity. Otherwise, you're going to be that place that no one could get into, and you're just too cool for yourself, and that's going to only last for so long, unless you're Manhattan. You know what I mean? But there's very specific places that can pull that off, but that cannot be how everybody acts.
Let me ask you this. There's a lot of restaurants. We have so many questions for you, just don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of restaurants try different things with their food, and I've eaten, some of my older couple friends, they're in their 60s or 70s, and why would you put a mango with a sea bass? What is that all about? Do those things really help? What are they doing with that?
This is my advice for anybody who eats anything, is yes, you have your staples, know where to get your staples, but honestly, life is too short not to try new things. And food is really beautiful, and food really is, I've said this before, just in different conversation, is I feel like food is sort of it bonds people together. It brings people together. It's a cultural experience. It teaches you about other people. It allows you to sort of disengage from the rest of the world and just sit around and talk. And if you're going to go out, don't, obviously, if it's too far out of your comfort zone, don't order it. But instead of complaining, maybe give it a try, because it's new and it's exciting. And even if you don't like it, now you have something else to talk about.
That's a great point. Great point. Does wine help the taste of food?
Yes.
All right. One of those answers.
No, I think it depends. I actually think it's, and this is just because a friend of mine taught this to me a long time ago, and I never had done this, for years and years and years, but he always starts a meal with champagne or cuvee. And I thought, at first I was like, oh, you're just so privileged. Is that why? And he's like, no, it's a palate cleanser. And I didn't realize that it actually completely takes away all of your previous food that you've had before this moment or whatever else is going on. It really does sort of create this wonderful open space for food to come out on its own. And wine in general, I've learned so much about wine in the last year. I've gone to a lot of different wine countries, and San Luis Obispo is a great place to go, Paso. And there's, of course, Sonoma and Napa, but I've been discovering more of like the central region. And what I've found is that the wine, the grapes in the wine, and the process of winemaking, good wine, mind you. But wine, again, is one of those very rare things that for anybody to say, there are some that are just blatantly awful, but for anybody to say that one is the very best, well, your palate is never going to be like mine. What you've eaten or experienced, no two palates will ever taste the same thing the same way. And that, to me, that's the beauty of food and wine and just eating and experiencing. So wine, I think, good wine, whether you're a white wine connoisseur or a red wine connoisseur, it does sort of open the palate a little bit, and the flavors that are in a really good wine or a really well-adapted wine will sort of marry well with the different flavors of food. And so it does help bring out citrus.
Does your website give you tips on what wines to use?
I think I do it not knowingly.
Okay.
But yeah, I would.
Just want to make sure
I
you
will
guys...
look into that. So now you can email me and ask me.
Yeah, red wine, white wine. What's going on here? So we've covered
Yeah.
a lot of senses so far, because I know we talked earlier about you want to make sure you access all 5 senses.
Yes.
So we've touched on sight, what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it too dark. Don't make it too bright. We've also touched on taste or palate.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't quite hit. I'm really curious how she's going to get a hearing on this, but we'll get to that in a minute. Nose.
Yes, I think smells are really important. I can tell you that I went to a restaurant in Santa Monica, and really well-known restaurant, but their front door reeked like of musty.
The front door reeked?
Like right when you walk in, like the rug had been saturated. I was like, a little Febreze would have made all the difference, you know? No, I think smells are huge. I mean, our memories are very, very, very sensory based. You could smell something and it will take you back to a place in your childhood. So I think smells are, above everything else, actually.
Smell.
I think smell is one of your most heightened senses.
So when you walk into the restaurant like that Santa Monica one, that could really start you off in a bad note already for the food. So you might give it a 6 or a 5, or you might have rated it an 8 or a 9.
Yeah. And it's, for me, that's a big thing. Like, I don't want to smell mildew. I don't want to smell the restroom. I don't want to smell, like a pungent air that doesn't have anything to do with the food that you're cooking. And I think those little things make a big difference. And some things can't be helped, but I think I have high expectations. Quality to me matters. And it doesn't matter what your price point is. Take pride in what you're presenting to other people who dare to walk in that door and feast on whatever you're presenting them, because it's a very personal thing.
She's absolutely
intimate.
right. It affects your unconscious mind a lot. You get these memories that are getting in there to the amygdala and hippocampus areas, and you can't really shake these unconscious factors. You go to these restaurants, and sometimes you don't even know why you don't like it, or you do like it.
Yeah,
You really
it's
don't
true.
know. All right, so I'm really curious, how do we use hearing as one of our senses?
Oh, I think that, okay, so I always joke that when I walk into a restaurant, I feel like a CIA operative.
You
Because
sound like one.
because I walk in there and immediately I can tell you what has happened in different corners of the room. I pay attention to textures and sounds and the conversations, and are there a lot of fights going on? Are people complaining a lot? Are people laughing? Are they talking in a normal tone? And all those little things set the pace for how you have a good meal. If you're sitting next to someone who's just, they're complaining every 2 seconds, well, that sort of unfortunately diminishes your experience. If you hear the sound of the grill, it just makes you want to eat. If you hear, sorry.
That's
if
a phone ding.
Sound effects.
That's right. Perfect time.
Yeah, I just think that overall, again, it comes down to what that's like when you walk in that door. I mean, and the louder it gets, obviously every restaurant wants a room to be crowded, and you don't want to feel like you have to whisper to talk. You should just enjoy this experience. But if it's too quiet too, and people don't talk very loud, and you feel like you just feel like this is like I'm in a library. This is not a good. And how much are you charging me for this experience? So yeah, exactly. So no, I think sound is a very you hear it outside. If you're walking by and you're hungry, where are you going to go?
And I want to touch upon a question. We got a couple minutes left.
Oh, right, okay.
But this is kind of a bizarre question, but I don't know if it has an influence or not. So will you hear certain foods when you're chewing internally?
Yes.
We have different types of sound. We hear externally, and then internally we hear ourselves talk, not the same as you hear me talk. Does that affect too, do you think?
Yes. I actually, if you go to a restaurant that has multiple things on a plate, try to take every single one of those things and put it on the spoon together, because you will have every texture represented. So you'll have a softness, you'll have a crispness, you'll have a sharpness, you'll have a pop of flavor, and you will hear those things, and you will hear them, and you will react in some, obviously, when you've bit on something that's too hard, and you're like, did I just break a tooth? Or, or is it what happened? But if it's that nice, beautiful crunch, and then that perfect, it's like a little dance inside your mouth, and you will hear it, and that totally affects how you're experiencing that.
Guess it wasn't so weird.
No, it's not at all.
Last question. We only have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
And if you want us to go down to a restaurant and check it out, let us know. I think it'd be kind of a fun field trip for us to take. I'd love to do a psychological exploration with you
I
for a
would
restaurant.
love that.
Hopefully they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Final question is touch. How does touch work in? I'm thinking about a burrito, a quesadilla, but who knows what I'm thinking.
Honestly, if you think about it, touch is a very sensual thing, right? Everybody reacts to touch. So a burrito, okay? Something as simple as a burrito, right? If it's like too soggy and you have to pick it up, guess what? You're like, man, I got to cut this thing. And everybody wants to pick up a burrito and eat the burrito. Nobody really wants to hand, no matter who you are. Let's be honest. It's a very primal thing. You just want to eat it. So I think touch is a huge factor, because it sends all these little the messages. It's sending all these messages. Sorry, I need coffee. It sends all these.
She needs coffee.
Yeah, it sends all these messages to your brain, and it's like if you touch something that's hot, if you actually don't look, you won't necessarily know. But when you see that it's hot, all of a sudden it sends these messages to your brain, and you freak out and you go, "Ow!" But you may not have actually said "ouch" had you not seen the experience. But I think food is the same way. If you don't even see it, and you just grab it, and all of a sudden it surprises you, it does change the way that you're going to experience whatever it is you're eating.
That's fascinating.
So,
who's a psychologist around here? Well, that's great. I'm so bummed we're running out of time. This is so many questions still left to answer. Hopefully you'll come back.
I would love to come back.
Or we'll come back, or we'll go with her on a field trip to one of the restaurants. If you want to see that, please send us an email. Let us know. And if you want any tips, we didn't get to that point, unfortunately, today, but if you want any tips on restaurants, please email or contact ATOD, A Taste of Dawn, with Dawn Garcia, founder and editor-in-chief. We thank you so much. Looks like our time is almost up. Last question of the day. What is the number one thing you will look for in a restaurant? Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip that question. I'm going to ask her, have you ever had Cuban food?
Yes.
What's your favorite dish? Because I'm Cuban.
I love, oh my gosh, why can I not think of,
running out of time.
pollo, I know how to eat chicken, actually.
Arroz con pollo?
Yes, arroz con pollo. Yes.
I like her even more.
But I actually like café con leche.
Oh, really?
Yes, I like a true café con leche, like a Cubano café con leche. Yeah.
I made a new friend. Thank you so much for being on the Circle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks you guys for tuning in and having me.
That's right. Thank you, everyone. Remember, our motto is simple. Wherever there's psychology involved, even in the restaurants, we're there. See you next time, everyone.